Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, April the 4th, the 94th day of the year. There are 271 days left in 2023. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Thom. On this day, on April the 4th, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a leader in the American Civil Rights Movement who was in Memphis, Tennessee to support a strike by the city's sanitation workers, was assassinated, supposedly by small-time criminal James Earl Ray. There is a lot of talk about division in our society today, and I'd like to remind myself of the words of Dr. King, which gives me perspective, not just on Black folks, but on white folks, but on the whole of humanity. Dr. King said about politics, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. On his role in society, he said, yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness, and all the other shallow things will not matter. On injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And this is perhaps my favorite. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. So our G-list guest today is Sonnie Hereford. Sonnie is originally from East Chicago, Indiana. And yes, I said that correctly, East Chicago, Indiana. He was the first Black child to integrate the Alabama public school system. Ooh, that doesn't sound like it was a lot of fun, but we'll see. He won the city of Huntsville unrated chess championship. I'm certainly interested in hearing about that. And he was a tennis team captain at S.R. Butler High School. We look forward to having this conversation with Sonnie Hereford. This edition of Tuesdays with Thom, of course, is sponsored by our partners, the Best Girl consulting firm. Best Girl has been providing customized solutions to executive issues for 34 years. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl creates the solution that fits your needs. So we'll get to our roundtable regulars. Introduce Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. How you guys doing?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Thom. Good morning, Barbara. I'm doing well. I hope you both are doing well also.
I'm doing well, thank you all.
So, Barbara, I'm going to start with you. And, for the first time in the NCAA basketball tournament, I think the women outshone the men.
I think so.
This year in terms of, well, it certainly, this is the most successful women's tournament ever. In terms of numbers of people, in terms of television coverage and so on and so forth. And there was a little bit of controversy, I guess it was maybe more than a little bit, on trash talking. And I don't know, everywhere I played sports and basketball, football, whatever, there was always trash talking. Some of it was pretty ugly.
Yes.
But this seemed to upset people. The young woman from LSU, when she did this, it's like I don't know what she was doing. Hell, I thought she had something in her eye. And I can remember trash talking, back, of course, when I played a lot of it they were just calling you the N word. It's like, okay,
Right.
is that all you got, man?
Right.
I heard that this morning from my teammates. So I don't know. So Barbara, your comment.
Yeah, Tom, there was a lot of talk and still is a lot of talk all over Twitter, all over social media about the gesture that Angel Reese made toward the end of the game there. She was looking at Caitlin Clark and made the gesture of, now you see me, now you don't, and pointed at the ring finger, basically saying, I got a ring, or, we're going to get the ring. And it's very interesting because social media just took it off and started calling her, classless, a thug, and that was very ghetto-ish, and it's the same, basically the same thing gesture that Caitlin Clark did in the game like 48 hours earlier. So not sure why people are having a problem with it when Angel Reese does it. Didn't have a problem, or they called it very aggressive when Angel Reese did it, but it was an assertive move by and confident move by Caitlin Clark. How do you all explain it? Why does the media treat them differently? That's the question of the day.
You got an answer?
The only obvious answer is so unfair. Uh, but it's okay for one person to do it and not for another. Yeah, that's the only obvious thing you can think of is the difference between them. They're both great basketball players. Um, they both are came great teams. The only thing I can say is it had to be something racial there, and the media is treating them differently.
When the girl threw the ball
Interested
behind
in
her
your
back out of
yeah,
bounds, um,
yes.
you guys feel she should have gotten a technical foul for that?
I have mixed emotions about that one too. It was national championship game. I think emotions are gonna fly. I think you should let them get away with that kind of thing, as long as it's not physically hurting anyone. I don't think the technical should have been called, but I can see. I mean, it's in the rule book. It can be called, so it wasn't like they did something they wasn't supposed to do. But I'm not sure they should have called it.
Michael?
Well, in regard to that, it's a universal rule that you just hand the ball to the official. That's what you're supposed to do. And I would think, especially someone that's in Caitlin Clark's status, should know that and know that she represents Iowa, and she should have done exactly that. However, on the other side of it, I think Caitlin Clark has reached the Tom Brady status, so she
Mm,
can do whatever, and it's shown as leadership,
hmm.
you know. And like you said, Barbara, it was assertive when she did it. Someone else that is not of Tom Brady's status, if they do it, then there's a problem with it. It's aggressive, you know.
Well,
Um,
well, to me, Angel Reese is,
Catholic.
is on that same status level, though. I mean, what's the difference? They're both.
That depends on who has the ink
Oh,
and who's
Say that
writing.
say
I
that
say that
again,
depends
Michael.
on who has the ink and
Yeah,
who's
I
doing the
agree.
writing.
I
mm,
agree. I would have called the technical on her. You
right,
learn that in basketball. You give the
right,
ball to the official.
right,
And she threw it this way and she was walking that way.
right.
So
Oh,
there's
yeah,
no
she
way
knew what
it
she
was
was
going
doing.
to the but I watched her, the whole time. I thought she had some attitude issues in terms of she was supposed to be the best player out there.
Right.
And when she pretty much embarrassed that girl from South Carolina
Oh, yes.
who couldn't make a long shot,
Right.
um, I just think she probably got what was coming to her.
She was very
Um,
disrespectful to, the players in South Carolina and Louisville as well. I mean, I think she was disrespectful to those players as well. So, you know, it, it was karma. It was time for her to get it. If you can't dish, if you can't take it, then you should be dishing it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, it was a great tournament,
Yes, it was.
and stuff happens. So
Absolutely. And I must say we should definitely congratulate LSU's Lady Tigers. I mean, that was a huge win and a great team effort on their part.
Boy, they were
They
hitting some
played.
shots in the first half, weren't they? I mean, every shot they threw up there,
Oh yes,
long distance threes.
they played an extremely well
Yeah.
played game. I mean, they were good. They were good.
Well, the girl from LSU that was hitting all the shots in the first half. I mean, she just
Moss,
threw one up at the buzzer that banked for three
yeah,
points.
from
That
like the parking lot.
that was not even squaring up and shooting. She didn't square up. She just threw it up.
Yeah,
And
It
it
went in.
banked there, baby. The bank
yeah.
was open.
But she didn't call it before she shot. You're supposed to call it in horse before you
Well,
shoot.
it still counted, though.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it's kind of funny though, as we sit here and we talk about this, and you talk about the trash talking, and Thom and I, we grew up where we really played basketball, and they really talked trash.
Mhm.
It's just that we didn't have social media back in those days, and you didn't pick up on it. But the gesture that Caitlin did to the girl from South Carolina when she waved her off,
Right,
back in the day when we played, we would say, "Oh, don't guard him. He self-check. He check
right.
himself."
Mhm.
We would say something like that, which
Right,
is what she was really trying to say, is that you can't shoot, you don't have confidence. You know,
right.
However, had I been the girl, I would have pulled into my range and shot it anyway. And,
Exactly.
and then if I hit it, I'd say, "Yeah, well, what you say now about that now?" But they used to talk about your mother, all kinds of stuff out there. Like Thom said, it was quite ugly, at that time, and it was to get you out of the game. So
And
Well,
it was,
we didn't
it,
talk quite that ugly in women's sports. I played softball, since fifth grade all the way through adulthood, actually. And we talked trash even among ourselves, and so, but it didn't get ugly. We didn't talk about anybody's mama, but we come in close on them. Hey, they can't hit the ball into to the outfield. It's always gonna be coming in infield. So outfield, y'all come on in. So we would trash talk too.
yeah,
yeah, but it wasn't um, so many millions watching on television, and it
Right,
wasn't um, so many people in the stands, and you
right.
didn't have the commentators. And yesterday, even though Big Mouth Stevens A. Smith had his comment to make,
Yes, he
and
did.
all of them made comments yesterday. And I, you know, Iowa was the darling of the tournament. Everybody wanted. Well, I'd say everybody. I did, but people really wanted to see Iowa win. And
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if everybody, but there were a few people that I know that wanted them to win.
there were, and sometimes people would. I mean, there was a. I can tell you two instances where I was involved in Georgia Tech. This guy, Randy Rhino, he was an All American, and so cornerback. So whenever I played against somebody who was an All American, I wanted to show him up because I felt I should have been an All American.
Hmm.
And so I caught a touchdown on the guy, and he was following me into the end zone. I turned around and gave him the ball, and that's kind of ugly. Now that I look back on it, I think, that was kind of ugly. But at the time, it was like, what are you following me for? You want
Right,
this? Here you
right,
go.
right.
And in high school, man, we were playing this team, and they were beating us right at the end, and it was an upset. It was not good. It was basketball, and man, I went up and slugged the guy, and we had this crazy coach. It's like, boy, you gonna get it when we get in the locker room, Gossam. He's gonna get you. So we went in the locker room, and he came in there, and he was a nut job, and he said, Gossam, I know you were trying to get the ball, weren't you? I said, yes, sir. He let it go, you know. But again, there wasn't thousands of people
Right, right. You did
viewing.
have the media watching you and writing about it and putting it all over social media. So yes.
So I don't know. I think sometimes when you're watching a game and the commentators, it's like they're not watching the same game.
Right.
They're seeing things totally different than
Hmm. That's true.
what we see it. So
And the latest controversy now, Tom, is Jill Biden made a statement that in addition to inviting LSU, the champions, to the White House, she wants to also invite Iowa's team. She was going to suggest to President Biden that Iowa team come as well. It's like, no, Jill, you don't give participation trophies. That's not how this works.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of controversy going on in social media about that as well.
That sounds
well,
like a Republican move to me.
Yeah.
At least that's what they would say if it was a Republican
Right.
first
Right.
lady. They would say that. The media would say that, but they're not going to say that on this issue. That
Right.
sounds
yeah.
real Republican to me.
Yeah. Well,
I hadn't heard that.
yeah, that just came out late last night. It's the first time I saw it. So, like I said, it's just going around social media, and I'm hoping she really didn't say it. I haven't seen a tape or video or anything
Well,
of her
she's an
actually saying it.
educator. She probably said it. She probably thought that was a peace
Peaceful thing to do.
offering. But
Hmm.
no, I think people are real serious about this, and
Oh yes,
so I think the smartest thing to do would be just stay out of it. And
absolutely.
if you're a politician,
Right.
um, it was a great game. It was. I didn't even watch the game last night
Hmm.
because I had gotten a feel of watching the women play, and
Right.
they were just incredible, man. And
Well, I tried to watch the game last night, Tom, and it was a letdown after watching the game on
that's what
Sunday.
I
So,
figured. That's what I figured. And it was
congratulations to UConn for winning, but I tell you, it really wasn't that much of a game in my opinion. I think San Diego State did good, and they tried their best, but it wasn't a comparison. The game on Sunday was much better.
well, it was great. Like I said, it was somebody described it as fierce and feminine. And
Hmm.
I thought that was a good description. They played
Yes,
hard, man, on both
yes,
sides.
yes.
And Iowa had, in addition to Clark, man, they had some girls that could shoot.
Oh yes,
If you left them open, they were gonna make it. You
right.
know, which was the way that team was constituted.
Hmm.
They had shooters around Caitlin Clark, which made her more valuable because you couldn't leave the shooters to double team her.
Right, right,
Um, I thought South Carolina was interesting in that I don't think they came up with a plan specifically for Iowa.
right.
I think they played the way they
Their
had
regular
played all
game.
year,
Yes,
and that wasn't going to work.
right.
They ran. Michael and I talked earlier about this, but they ran a Steph Curry offense. Clayton
Yes.
Clark would run off 3 or 4 screens before she'd get the ball,
Hmm.
and then when she got it, she could make it. So um, it was great. I give credit to both teams,
Oh
and
yes.
so it was wonderful. Um, Anything else from you guys, Barbara, Michael?
Well, I just want to say, happy Easter to everyone. Easter's coming up this Sunday. And this is Holy Week, so there's a lot of activities, religious activities going on. But happy Easter to our viewers.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
I'd like to say, today is a historical moment, very significant. The former president is going to be arraigned. Been indicted, and he has to show up for court and stuff. They're saying there's no handcuffs and what have you. And what I find ironic about that is 75 years ago this month, the first African American police officers were sworn in the city of Atlanta. They call them the Atlanta Eight. And what's so interesting about that is how it came to be. Mayor Hartsfield at the time wanted more African American votes. And he told African American civic and civil leaders that if you could get me 10,000 votes, we'll get you some police officers. So they got the 8 black police officers, but they were stationed at the local YMCA. They could not have guns. They couldn't use patrol cars. They couldn't arrest white people, especially affluent white people. They could only assist if a white person was in the process of conducting a crime. They could assist.
Wow.
There was one colleague that put a $200 bounty on one of the black officers' head.
Wow.
their colleagues would try to hit them with the patrol cars. And it is estimated that in 1947, 25% of the police force were KKK. And then this happened in 1948 that they came on. So it's ironic. I wonder how many black police officers will be around the president today as he's arraigned. I find that quite ironic.
Yes, that is ironic.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And Atlanta was the city too busy to hate, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently there was some hate somewhere.
Yeah, that was before
Yeah.
they became too busy to hate, Thom.
Yeah.
Well, you got to give it to Hartsfield. I understand what he was trying to do. So he at least took that step. And so, and I checked, and now there are like 350 black police officers on the Atlanta police force at this time.
Well, sometimes when
Out of
you're
how
in
many total?
Close to about 3,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was more than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have thought it was more black officers.
I understand. There could be some outdated information, but that was what I saw last night.
But that's 10%.
Yeah.
Force. Every time I go, all I ever see are black police officers.
Yeah. Well, that also depends on where you are, because these officers, they were only allowed to patrol in black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's interesting. That is interesting. Okay. Anything else? I want to offer congratulations to Joyce. She has joined the Illinois State Foundation Board, and so I get an Illinois State T-shirt.
I see you with your shirt on this morning, Thom.
Yeah,
that looks nice.
Yeah. She joined the ISU Foundation Board and attended her first meeting. So, congratulations to Joyce.
Congratulations,
Joyce.
Okay. Anything else for you guys? All right. Well, let's move on to Sean. She's got a minute for us.
Good morning. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. Hello, April. Tell me everything. April represents new beginnings, and before we can move on with the new, we must honor the times of old. And on this day, Martin Luther King Jr. speaks out against the war. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, delivers a speech entitled Beyond Vietnam in front of 3,000 people at Riverside Church in New York City. In it, he says that there's a common link forming between the civil rights and peace movements. King proposed that the United States stop all bombing of North and South Vietnam, declare a unilateral truce in the hope that it would lead to peace talks, set a date for withdrawal of all troops from Vietnam, and give the National Liberation Front a role in negotiations. King said the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. We were taking the young Black men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Harlem. King maintained his anti-war stance and supported peace movements until he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, a year to the day after delivering his Beyond Vietnam speech. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute.
Thank you, Sean. That was great. There was a lot of speculation that King, one of the reasons he was assassinated was because of that speech when he called for the U.S. to get out of Vietnam. And Um, so it was pretty. It was an incredible time. I'll just put it that way.
Yes.
An incredible time. And when you there are a lot of good books. One I read, Codename Zorro by Dick Gregory and Mark. I can't think of the other guy's name, but they don't believe, just like a lot of people, that James Earl Ray killed Martin Luther King. As a matter of fact,
Right.
James Earl Ray recanted his confession and said he didn't do it.
Right.
Um, but and the King family doesn't believe that he did it. So, but April 4th, day I'll always remember, and I can tell you exactly what I was trying to do that day. But let's move on. Um, while we got some time, Hollywood has the A list, and here on Tuesdays with Thom, we have the G list. Now, G list guest today is Sonnie Hereford. Um, Sonnie is Sonnie is he graduated. He went to school. He was from East Chicago, Indiana. I have to think about that, East Chicago, and then come back to Indiana. But he became the first black child to integrate the Alabama public school system. He later would win the city of Huntsville unrated chess championship. I want to talk to him about that. He has a pretty incredible bio. So let's just bring Sonnie on and get him to talk with us. Good morning, Sonnie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. It's a pleasure to be with you folks.
Well, it's great to be with you. Now, what happened to that? You moved it. Okay. I was going to comment on it. Sonnie, you're doing all right this morning. We appreciate you being with us, man.
How's that? Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I didn't want anybody to think that was a beer bottle. You know?
But I was going to say, where's that beer bottle?
Yeah.
It's a hot sauce.
It's a hot sauce bottle, just so everybody knows. That's a hot sauce bottle.
So, Sonnie, I have a good friend of mine who is Caucasian, and he tells a story. Matter of fact, we did a play, and in that play, he talked about they had one black child in their school in Montgomery, and what that was like. He felt for that child, and so you weren't the only black child, I assume, but you became the first black child to integrate.
I was in that school.
Oh, you were? Okay. Can you just talk about that and what that was
school,
like?
Yes. Sure. So one interesting thing about that is back in the 60s, if you were black here in Alabama, even North Alabama, if you were black, you almost certainly worked for someone who was white. And so when my father started this lawsuit in 1963 to get the schools integrated, there were about 27 black families that said they wanted their children to be part of this integration. But over the weeks and months that it took for the trial, or for the case to be heard, we got down to 4. We were down to only 4 black families by the time the judge had made a decision because of threats and intimidation. Like I said, if you were black, you almost certainly worked for someone who was white, and they didn't necessarily see us as freedom fighters. They saw us as troublemakers. And a lot of times, the father would be the head of the household. He's supporting the family. And if his boss tells him, John, I heard you've been participating in these marches. I don't want to hear that anymore, or you might not have a job here. Well, what are you going to do? That's a tough situation. So like I said, 27 families down to 4. Now, my father was a doctor, so he had his own practice. One of the other young men, his father was a minister and had his own church. And then the young lady in our group, her mother was a beautician and owned her own beauty salon. Now, the fourth young man, the fourth student, the third young man, I'm not sure what his parents did, but you see the pattern there. You see the pattern that those who were somewhat independent could stay with this thing the whole way. But anyway, so we were down to 4 families, and the 4 of us happened to be in different school districts And so we went to 4 different schools. And I was allowed to be first because, like I said, my father had brought the lawsuit, and we actually had federal marshals here to protect us. And so they staggered the integrations that morning so that those federal marshals could go from school to school to
Oh,
school and protect the students. And as I understand it, they were in plain clothes so they could mingle with the crowd, rather than being up on some step someplace and having
Mhm.
to come down if some trouble developed. They could be right there among the crowd and incognito, and then handle anything. But yeah, so that's how it happened. It was called Fifth Avenue School, was the one that I went to, Fifth Avenue School. Um, it named Fifth Avenue because that's the street that it was on. It had been renamed to Governor's Drive, named after Governor Wallace, at some point.
ironic.
But I'm glad I went to Fifth Avenue School and not
Right.
before the renaming. So, but yeah, that's how it happened. That I was the only one in that school, even though there were 3 others at different schools here in Huntsville,
I
and
think
we were the first in the state.
wow. One of the things that's interesting to me, listening to you recount that, is there's a lot of talk about Birmingham and the civil rights movement, Montgomery and the civil rights movement, even Mobile,
Yeah,
but very little talk about Huntsville.
Right.
yeah.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think it's because the strategists here were very careful to try to keep things nonviolent. And it's the fire hoses and the German shepherds being released on people. That's what gets news. That's what
That's
gets
right.
attention. But
Hmm.
see, for example, a lot of the people who participated in our civil rights movement were college age men and women, a lot of women as well. But when you're in college, you're in about the best physical shape of your life. And some of those guys especially, and some of the women, but some of those guys, if there had been some fighting that broke out, it would have been fine with them. So what the strategist would do was give some of those guys who were likely to, have some trouble, they'd give them jobs like making signs for the movement back in the
Mm,
warehouse,
mm. Yeah.
instead of being on, not everyone, of course, but it's people that you thought might potentially be a problem, then they'd be given jobs in the background. And I think because we were successful at that, at keeping the movement nonviolent. Dr. King had been here in 62, March of 1962. And that was one of the things that he stressed, was that we needed to keep the movement nonviolent. Now, he also said we needed to get people to register to vote, and we needed to get the schools integrated. But the nonviolence was very important because he knew that if people were getting hurt and if property were getting destroyed, that we would not get very far with our movement, and it wouldn't even matter who was right and who was wrong. If
Mhm.
the law enforcement, if they see property getting damaged, they've got to step in and do something about it. It doesn't matter which side you're on; it's going to get stopped. So anyway, but that's why I think that we didn't get the same news clips as Birmingham did, because it was a different environment here. And Huntsville, by the way, is not a typical southern city, and even back then it was not a typical southern city, because we already had NASA and DOD here. We had the Army and and NASA here in Huntsville. So that meant several things. It meant that we have a lot of federal contracts here, and there were some people who were smart enough to realize that if there were a lot of chaos, some of those federal contracts can go someplace else, right? And we
Mhm.
use that. Our strategists used that as leverage. They made sure that the authorities knew that we were aware of that,
Mhm.
that thing. And then the other thing is that because of DOD and NASA and the contractors who came here to support them, we had a pretty good cross section of the country here, and we had, I will say, better educated people here in Huntsville
Mhm.
than most other places in Alabama. I'll put it that way. Probably most other places in the South, but certainly most other places in Alabama. And I think that the bigotry and the problems tend to go down where the education level goes up.
You said that, and I agree with you that your dad and the minister and the lady with the beauty salon were able to participate because of their independence.
Exactly.
There's a lot of thought that integration destroyed a lot of independence amongst black businesses and so on and so forth, because um, uh, schools, a lot of the independence went away.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, my dad worked in one of the pipe shops, and we still got a photo of him holding his sign when he was protesting, what have
Uh-huh.
you. But it took a lot of courage. If
Absolutely.
you weren't independent, it took a lot of courage
Absolutely.
to do that, to be a protester, to
Right.
go out there and put your job and maybe even your life on the line.
Exactly. Exactly.
Barbara, Michael,
I'll start off. Good morning, Sonny, and thank you
Good
for joining
morning.
us this morning.
Sure.
Yeah, we're the same age, and I remember, you know, my family moved to a majority white neighborhood, and they moved. Purchased that home because the proximity it was to the elementary school. My parents wanted us to be close to a school, so you know they only had one car. My dad used that car to go to work, and so we could be within walking distance of the school. My mom went to try to register us for school. You know, that first year we moved into the home. We didn't do first. I was in a school system, and my fifth grade year is my first year going to an integrated school, and I was the only black in my classroom. And I still remember to this day how lonely and isolated I felt. I can only imagine. Tell me what it felt like to you to walk into that school. You're the only black in that school as a 6-year-old child. Do you still remember anything about that?
I do. I do remember some things. And it's interesting because being that young, and I'm glad that I was that young and not, say, in high school, because I was too young to know how the world can be. I was too young to know how afraid I should have been. Because
Right.
I think one of the reasons Dr. King said that what we needed to do in this community was get the schools integrated. That was one of the things, because he knew that, you know, children are just children for the most part, until they're taught that they're not supposed to like people, you know, who are different than they are. And at 6 years old, a lot of kids had not been taught that yet, you know.
Right.
Now, I remember one very poignant incident in first grade in the cafeteria, where, you know, the old fashioned cafeteria where you have your trays stacked in a stack, and you take one down off the top, slide it along the rail. And there was a white girl in line next to me who was shorter than I was and couldn't reach her tray. And I took it down and I went to hand it to her. And she said, "Oh no, my mother told me never to take anything from a nigger," like that. And
Yeah.
see, the thing is, now, as you can imagine, that could have been a very ugly incident, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
But even at 6 years old, and I mean, was barely 6 years old, um, I could tell that she didn't even know what she was saying. She
Right.
would not have said those words to me if she had
Right.
understood what she was saying. And so I've carried that lesson with me my whole life, that, you know, children are just children, and we accept each other until somebody teaches us differently.
Right.
You know,
That's
we accept each other. So I'm so glad that I was only 6 and not, say, in 11th grade
yeah,
when I had to go, because I would have been scared to death. I mean, I would have done it. I would have done it, but I
Right.
would have been
Right.
looking over my shoulder every step,
yeah.
you know.
Yes.
So,
Michael,
yeah. So, Sonny, thanks for being here. And it's interesting as I listen to you speak. And Barbara, I too was in the same situation, but I was in Auburn, the home of Auburn University.
Hmm.
And I recall, and I never even thought about it until we had this conversation. I remember my grandparents telling me at third grade that it would be the last time I ever go to a predominantly black school.
Right.
Mhm.
And I was going to have the choice to go to Lee Academy, which was a private school in Auburn, or go to Kerry Woods. Lee Academy, I would have been the only black kid in the school. And
Mhm.
Hmm.
I chose Kerry Woods because there would be maybe 3 or 4 beside
Mhm.
myself there. So I
Mhm.
took Kerry Woods. But I never even thought about it. I tell people I went to school in a taxi cab. But the reason being is because where I live in the school I was going to, there was not a bus. And my
Hmm.
Mhm.
grandparents didn't want me to ride a bus. So they and some of the other people hired a taxi cab company to come pick us up and take us to school. So that's how I went to school during that time. So it's interesting remembering that. And that was, I don't ever recall anything being said about it. It was just done very quietly there in the city of Auburn.
Right.
But in reading some of the background and talking about getting ready for that day and leading up to that, I found something interesting that your father did, and I'd like for you to expound on this, is that when the phone would ring, he would answer and say, Officer Timpson, Huntsville Police Department.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, of course, back then the technology to trace calls and so on wasn't like it is today. But we were getting death threats at the house. We were getting bomb threats, and at one point, my parents didn't want me to answer the phone because they didn't want to subject me to that. They wanted to make me aware that what we were doing here was out of the ordinary. Getting ready to go to school and all, but they didn't want to expose me to some of the ugliness, and so that's what my father would do. And see, the thing is, our friends and family knew to expect that, Officer Timpson. So they would hear that and they would just go right on with the conversation. But somebody calling to threaten you, who thinks there might be a police officer on the other end of the line, the next thing you would hear was click.
I love it.
That's great.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Dad came up with. As far as I know, he's the one who came up with that idea. He's certainly the one who implemented it.
That's great.
Well, that was slick. That was outmaneuvering them.
Absolutely.
To come up with
Yes.
that. So that was just fantastic there.
Yep.
That's great.
Did you, and following up on that, and Barbara kind of asked you about this at 6 years old, but did you have any idea that you were really making history? And it must be an unreal or surreal feeling to go back to where you and your father walked and your footsteps are there now. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, it was something to go through. And, I'm thinking about the groundbreaking for Sonnie Hereford Elementary School. My father spoke at the groundbreaking, and one of the things he said was that they used to spit at me and throw things at me and call me names. He said, now they name schools after me. And yes, and Sonnie Hereford School is where we have those footprints. That's not actually the school that I integrated back then, although what was on that site back in '63 was Terry Heights School, and that is one of the schools that integrated. That's just not the one that I went to. I went to Fifth Avenue School, but yeah, that was something else. In 2013, that was the 50th anniversary of the integration, and my father and I did reenact the walk. Everything in that whole area is different. Even the street has been widened, so the sidewalk is in a different place. The school is long gone, but there's another building that's in the same location where the school was, and so we were able to recreate the walk with some media there and some friends and family there as well. And that was quite an event. And of course, this September will be 60 years.
Wow.
So we'll be planning another event. In fact, we've already started to plan another event with probably something similar to what we did before, reenacting the walk. Although, Dad won't be there, unfortunately, to walk with me, but we'll probably do something else at that same location.
Interesting.
Yes. And Sonnie, you went on to Butler High School and eventually became the SGA president. But you did something interesting right before you were president-elect, I think, at that time.
Right.
You were instrumental in getting them to remove the Confederate flag as emblem there to school. So tell us about that situation.
Right. Well, that's interesting because the fellow whose idea it was to do that was actually white, and his parents were Wallace supporters back then. But he was my schoolmate. He was a year older than I was, and he had been the SGA president the year that I was a junior, and I was sort of his protege, But it was his idea, and he and I got together and we went down to the school board. I think it was during the summer between my junior and senior years, and we were able to convince them that that was inappropriate. Now, I had a lot of discussions with now we were the Butler High Rebels, by the
Right.
way, and waved the
Right.
Confederate flag at the
Right.
games and played Dixie at the pep rallies and at the football games and all of that. And I had a
Right.
lot of discussions with my Butler schoolmates that was no longer appropriate. And they would say, but that's our tradition, that's our legacy and our tradition. And I said, yeah, but that's the tradition from when the school was segregated.
Right.
And some of them heard me and most of them did not, of course. But yes, but it was his idea. But together we went to the school board. Like I said, I believe it was either late the spring before or during the summertime when school was out. But they actually issued a mandate that there would be no more Confederate
Wow.
no more Confederate indicia or regalia on any school property, including the two football stadiums that we use there.
Wow.
So see now, most places I've been up north, a lot of the high schools will have their own football stadium.
Yes.
But here in Huntsville, we had two stadiums that all the city high schools used. So, but the Confederate indicia and regalia was banned from all of those school sites and from those places where the sporting events were held. And I personally had a hand in painting over the Confederate flag in our gymnasium. I had a small crew with me, but I was on that crew. I made sure to be on that crew.
That's great.
You brought back memories for me because we played Butler in basketball, and I remember that Confederate flag painted on the wall.
It took up a whole wall.
That's right.
Wall at the end
Butler
of the gym.
Rebels.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. You brought that memory back for me. So tell your father, I'm just curious. He had his own practice.
Right.
Did he have white patients?
He had a few white patients because we being kids, we'd hang out at the office sometimes or go down there to get some money or something like that. So I would see that he did have a few white patients, but as I recall, that was not real common back in those days for a white person to go to a black doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Questions?
Yeah. Sonnie, there's a photo that shows you and your father walking with your head tilted down, and it leads everyone to believe that's you on your way into school.
Yeah.
But actually it's not. It's after you were turned away. Expound on that, please.
Yeah, that was that very first day, which would have been September 3rd, 1963. Back in those days, school always started the Tuesday after Labor Day. Well, see, now we start like a month earlier than that. We start in early August, now here in Alabama at least. But so Dad and I had walked to school, and it was about a block and a half to get to where that school was. And we could have gotten into a car. It would have been safer probably. But he said he part of what he wanted to do was make the point that it was close enough for us to walk to that school. And that's why I should be allowed. That was one reason I should be allowed to go to that school versus the all black school, which was probably a mile and a half from the house, something like that. I'm not sure. But yeah, so we walked. And what happened was that Governor Wallace had kept the 4 schools in Huntsville closed, the ones that were going to integrate. Governor Wallace had ordered that those schools be kept closed. And I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that his thinking was they were accusing him of discriminating. But if he didn't let anybody go to school, then you can't accuse him of discriminating, right? Now if he had held the 4 black children out, that could be a problem. Right. But if you don't let anybody go, and sure enough, nobody got to school. And on those days, at least at those 4 schools, as far as I know, the other schools in Huntsville were allowed to open on that day, the ones that were not planning to integrate. But I know that those 4 were all kept closed. And even to this day, I'll run into someone who was a white student at one of those schools back in 1963 and remembers, that's actually the day that we got in. This would have been September 9th. 1963. So this was the first day that we got in. That's the one I think that you were referring to, and that is turned away. We're walking east up Governor's Drive in this photo, head, and the school would be behind us. And as you look at the picture over to the left, and home was in front of us the way we were walking. So yeah, but you're right. That is, for some reason, that became the picture that a lot of newspapers and TV stations would use over the years when they were going to report on something that had to do with school desegregation or other racial matters. A lot of times that photo would show up. And yeah, probably 95% of the people think that that's us going to school, but that is indeed us after we had been turned away and returning home from school. And we were not allowed to go that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. But by the Monday morning, September 9th, Governor Wallace relented and the schools were allowed to open. And like I said, that's when the federal marshals were here to escort us and make sure there was no trouble.
How did your parents explain this to you?
Now that's a good question, because they wanted me to understand that I was representing more than just myself and just my family, you know, the way I would conduct myself once I got there. They wanted me to know that, but at the same time, they didn't want me to know everything because they didn't want to scare me. They didn't want me to be afraid, you know, and so without remembering specifics, I knew that this was special. I knew that there was something special. But to answer an earlier question, I had no idea how special it was. I don't think I realized it till probably middle school or high school did I really come to realize. And as a child, it's not something I talked about a lot, you know, to other students. I didn't go around, you know, bragging that I was the first one or anything like that. But then after I got a little older and realized the significance, it is, I do a lot of speaking engagements these days, mostly schools and some to churches and other civic organizations.
I think one of the things that was interesting was that because of all the stuff on television, the civil rights stuff, so on and so forth, and I was older when I got involved in integration at school. I was 14. You felt you were contributing to the civil rights movement. You felt that you were doing something that was special, that was related to civil rights. And, you know, I don't remember my parents talking about it to us, about our role in it.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, my dad was involved. So I don't know. It was just, it's, you know, you think about today. Well, I shouldn't. This is probably not a good example, but when kids are getting killed at schools, the fear a parent could have had to send their child to be an only.
Yes.
Right. Being an only is tough.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
But I can tell you, one of the things that my parents had explained to me was that, you know, people are probably going to call you names and stuff, but you can't be ready to fight every time somebody calls you a name, you know, which reminds me a little bit on obviously a different scale, but what Jackie Robinson went through. You know, it wasn't enough for him just to be a fantastic baseball player, which of course he was. He had to have the right temperament for that to work. And I felt like, you know, it wasn't going to be enough for me to just be a good student, which I was, very good student, but I had to have the right temperament, because that, I'll call it an experiment, could have failed just because I was getting sent home every day because I was in a fight, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was playing football at Auburn, we only had 2 black guys on the team at the time, but you know, this white kid, in the middle of the game, he called me the N-word, and I turned around and I said, "Is that all you got, man?"
Yeah.
I hear that from my teammates.
Yep.
He didn't know what to say. Barbara, Michael, you got another question?
Well, yeah, I kind of would like to echo what you both have just said. You know, and I recall when my grandparents gave me the choice of where I would go to school, they never talked about any of the significance. I asked why, and I remember my grandmother specifically saying that the world is made up of all different types of people, all different races, and it's not just one race, and you got to learn to be able to interact with everyone.
Right.
This is why you're going to this school, you know. And then she prepared me by saying stuff, you know, about people may call you names and stuff, but you know, remember this: sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That type of stuff was drilled into me so that I could maybe adapt and be able to get through it. But it's interesting as we sit here and talk about, and all this stuff comes back, especially at that age. I never even thought about in the city of Auburn that I was one of the first to integrate schools there. But it was not a big thing made of it because I guess it was Auburn University, and it was just kind of eased into it.
So on a different level, so tell us about being a chess club president. So obviously you were a good chess man.
Yep, I had started playing, like I said, in third grade. And by the time I got up to middle school, you know, I had gotten pretty good, at least among my peers, among my school peers. And we actually, when I was in middle school, we actually played against some high schools. And I remember I would win my matches against those. I played number one for my middle school. I would win my matches against the number one player from some of the high schools. Not every time, as I recall, but at least half of the time, I think I would win those matches. But by the time I got to high school, of course, I was even better. And there's a thing called the United States Chess Federation, and that's how one gets a ranking. You play in sanctioned tournaments. Well, I hadn't reached that point yet. So in Huntsville, they had two tournaments. Whenever they would have tournaments, they'd have two. One for the rated players, the ones who had joined the USCF and gotten a rating, and then for the unrated players. So I was somewhat of a novice, you know, at least among that group. And so I played in the unrated tournament, and I think I had to win 6 matches to be the champion. And I played against one guy. Went to his place to play the game because we had to play during the week, not just on the chess meeting nights. And I remember he was dipping snuff or something and spitting into a bottle while we were playing. Okay, I played another guy, an older gentleman, who smoked a pipe the entire game and blew the smoke through the pieces up into my face, you know, across the board toward me, you know. But I beat them both. You know, I didn't let them psych me out or anything.
So you were playing adults then.
Oh yeah. Some of these folks were 50, 60 years old and worked at NASA and stuff.
Okay.
You know? But seriously,
I thought you were playing other kids your age.
No. The unrated tournament was for adults. Now there were some younger people in there. But the ones that I remember specifically were grown folks. You know, I was in high school and they were grown folks.
Did you ever play for money then?
No, maybe a Coke or something like that, or a hamburger or something. Never any kind of serious exchange, nothing like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sonnie, you got anything you want to talk about that we haven't asked you?
No, this is fantastic, and I'm glad to know about this show. I'm going to make sure to publicize this going forward. Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, I like this format. I like this format, and I love what you folks have working here.
And you went to Notre Dame.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Are you Catholic? Are you Catholic?
Well, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
You know, baptized when I was a child. When I was a child, you know, baptized. Okay. I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore. Okay. But yes, I did. I graduated in '79 from Notre Dame. I like to tell people I was there when Joe Montana was there, because a lot of people remember when Joe Montana played, certainly in the pros, if not in college.
Yeah,
certainly in the pros. Yeah, he's actually a year younger than I am. He was a class behind me at Notre Dame. Joe Montana.
Okay.
Sounds great.
That's great.
Barbara, Michael, any final questions?
No questions. Just say thank you so much for joining us today. This has been wonderful. Michael, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I would just like to note that it's kind of another interesting twist to this is that your father had a conversation with Dr. Martin Luther King about integrating the schools, and your father came up with the idea, well, why not my son? And then here it is, April 4th,
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to be celebrating, unfortunately, the assassination of Dr. King. I just find it really interesting, the twist in there. And
Yeah.
here you are, a product of a meeting between your father and Dr. King.
Yes,
Yes, indeed.
absolutely.
Yes,
What
indeed.
was your father's? This is a tough question, but what was your father's reaction when Dr. King was killed?
Well, he and I talked about that, and he has told me that he was driving at the time that he heard the news on the radio and had to pull off the road for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we're going to move on. Matter of fact, I'll do my closing commentary, and it's pretty much about that. I remember the assassinated, and I was trying to get home from school. And to get home from school, I had to take two buses, one to town, and then transfer to get the bus home. And boy, the word had gotten out that Dr. King was assassinated, and man, I was really scared. I was afraid that night. I'll be honest. And Birmingham had little disturbance. But there was stuff going on all over the country, and um, I'll never forget that night. I got on that bus, and I was so happy to get off that bus in my community, um, and that nothing had happened. Dr. King says, if we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective. That was a sermon he delivered on Christmas Day in Atlanta, Georgia in 1967. I think if people go back and listen to his words or read his words, then you cannot misconstrue who this man was and what he was to the United States of America. And that's how I see it on this April 4th in the year 2023. That's our show for today. I want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. We want to thank our G-List guest, Sonnie Hereford. Sonnie, you were absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thank Barbara, Sean, Joyce, and Michael. And that's it. For this Thursday, April 4th in the year 2023, remember, enjoy yourself, make every day count, stay safe. Peace.